standing ready. Lord needs, I could take a guess. Oh, would you please? We are ready. I'm lifted by the Spirit's peace. I guess we're never going home. Never joining St. John. Could never be alone. Well, I guess I'm well adjusted, but the pains they never leave, except for my feet.
I find that you don't get it, that you're a danger. You remain a danger. I'm a judge who believes in life and rehabilitation when rehabilitation is possible. I have many defendants come back here and show me the great things they've done in their lives after probation, after parole. I don't find that's possible with you.
There's definitely something cooking. This guy keeps on looking.
Hello humans, welcome back to the Slackline Quote of the Day broadcast. You are listening to The Boss.
The boss is coming!
That's a made-up dumb fairy tale name, you
That was an excerpt from Judge Rosemarie Aquilina's sentencing of serial sexual assaulter Larry Nassar from USA Gymnastics. He was a doctor that molested and sexually assaulted, like, according to the accusations that came out, at least 265 girls, 7 of which he was actually being tried for doing, but they had over 150 girls and young women and their families come forward to give victim statements during the sentencing, which I guess like spanned over a few days, almost a week. This judge opened it up to all these different people to come in and didn't say no to anybody that wanted to give a victim statement that had been affected by Mr. Nassar. And so yeah, so that little clip brings us in today. Bringing us to our quote. Who is our sponsor today for our quote? You know what? Normally I make a joke here, but with a joke fake sponsor or something like that. But I don't think it's really appropriate considering the type of conversation we're going to have today about abuse in power situations, and specifically we're going to talk about really sports today. But so that quote that we're gonna steer off from is from Judge Rosemarie Aquilina herself, from later on in that sentencing. I am not vulnerable to you or to criminals. I swore to hold the Constitution and law, and I am well trained. I know exactly what to do. This time I'm going to cure it. It is my honor and privilege to sentence you, because, sir, you do not deserve to walk outside of a prison ever again. That is Judge Rosemarie Aquilina to Larry Nassar as she sentences him to 175 years in prison. And that was just the state charges. He's also been sentenced to 60 years federally for possessing child pornography. So this guy's just an all-around bad dude. And yeah, I wanted to bring it up, because the judge is getting a little bit of criticism for her kind of harsh statements as she gave the verdict. A lot of people, well, I mean, you can make the argument that the judge needs to be impartial and unbiased and show that, because it's not really their place to take any sort of prejudice into a judgment, and like that's kind of the whole foundation of the legal system and trial by jury and impartial judges and all that stuff. What I read about this morning was that this was, a sentencing hearing and not an actual trial, because he did plead guilty. And so during the sentencing hearing, there's not as much of a need for her to show impartiality towards the defendant, because he has already been convicted with the crime, and they're just sentencing him. And of course, the argument that he's a despicable person, and that especially in times when all of this type of systematic and endemic abuse comes to light, it's nice to be able to put a period on the point of sentencing somebody to life and then some, double lives, triple lives in prison. A friend of mine actually mentioned even the kind of the exorbitant length of the sentence, and why something like that might get so sort of over sentenced. And when you have cases of murder, sometimes those people don't even get like 10, 12 years in prison. I mean, A, we're in Canada, and so we're talking about people here, and B, as we discussed when I was talking with him, it was tough. I mean, something like murder, I mean, there's so many different degrees of how you could possibly end up killing somebody, from a straight up accident to first degree, and to serial killers, as far as like people that murder and dozens to people that murder dozens of people. There are different degrees of sentencing to all of that, and just like this case, this person was a serial rapist, by all accounts, and it's arguably just as bad, if not worse, to leave a lasting impact on not just your victim but their families as well, versus a case like murder, where you leave a lasting impact obviously on families, and the victim is unfortunately no longer around. So yeah, I mean, you can't compare those things, is really the point. You can't compare really any sort of, criminal cases are all kind of based on precedents, but you can't really cross lines as far as one crime worse than the other. As far as that goes, I think you have to take it on a case by case basis for sure, and not really think about it when you're considering other cases, like as far as how much time somebody should be getting. I don't know, all those things, they evolve, right? We've had revelations of this kind of like I said, endemic abuse in a bunch of different areas, and how that would have been sentenced a few years ago is going to be different than how it's going to be sentenced now because of that, and it should be. But I wanted to shed a little light on this because it seems like the Hollywood abuse scandal dominates most of this type of hashtag Me Too talk, but as we see here, this isn't just like a Hollywood casting couch type problem. It's just a general problem of humanity, and not enough, I guess, oversight on the people that we allow into these types of positions, and not enough scrutiny when scrutiny and immediate action when complaints do come out. I've been going through this case. I went through a case about U.S. swimming and coaches that had raped kids there. Also, I went through a thing on classical music this morning, and how conductors have basically used it for their own kind of personal sex shop in a weird way. And when you go through these articles and through these stories, there's inevitably cases of people that look the other way when they were told that this was happening. People that are in high positions, and people that continue to put these people into high level positions, regardless of the types of allegations they're facing. Those people tend to lose their jobs all of these committee members from the U.S. Gymnastics and from the U.S. Olympics committee, like, all resigned and all this type of stuff. But at what point do maybe those people bear some sort of criminal responsibility for not acting or for not saying something when they could have, or for knowingly putting people in vulnerable positions with people that have issues like this in their past, because it permeates everywhere. Like, these are just, they're opportunities for these types of people to be around their victims. The judge even said how he knew he was this way. He had this issue and had a pedophilia issue, and instead of seeking help and avoiding temptation, he puts himself in a position of power with young people. And we've seen it up here in cases with hockey coaches, and we've seen it in cases of priests and that type of thing. It's not an accident that these people gravitate towards positions where they can be around their victims. So then the question becomes, how do you spot that? Well, you can't really spot it, I don't think, until it actually happens, which is unfortunate. But there's been this mentality through all of this stuff, and especially unfortunately with victims who feel shame and feel in a lot of cases like they can't speak out, or they'll lose jobs or positions on teams or whatever the case is. Part of this whole movement is about allowing those people to speak and believing them when they do. But then not just believing them, but also putting into action ways of helping them or helping others from not having to endure that type of stuff. Whether that's, supporting them in their struggle to come to terms with what happened and to expose it, and to take matters to the police when required, including, I think, against those who stop it. Like, if you go to your Olympic committee member or chairman or whatever and say that you have multiple girls that have been accusing this doctor of sexual abuse, and nothing happens, you don't do anything from that, unfortunately, the only next course is for those people to take the next step into criminal charges and that type of thing, which obviously happened here. How many people have to pile up before you build a case, right? Like, until you have at least a few victims from the same person, it's their word against the defendant. And what do you do? Like, if there's no physical evidence of anything, if nobody wants to testify as a witness or as a previous victim of that person, then what can the justice system really do? Like, it's hard to go after these types of cases, I think, in comparison to something like a murder or a robbery or something like that, because in those types of cases you have the crime in front of you. You have evidence of the crime. You have a dead person, or you have something missing from a house. And whether the owner of the house or the spouse of the victim claim it's this person that did it, yeah, the police will investigate those people, but they also will follow all these other leads. They don't just assume that this person did it because the neighbor said that they had a grudge against their neighbor, and that's why he killed their daughter or something like that. Like, that, again, that'll certainly be investigated, and the person will be questioned if they were, if there's any evidence that they were there, including witness statements. But again, like, there is a crime that had happened, and so if they have evidence that it wasn't this person, or that person wasn't in the room, or whatever the case is, then they still have a murder to solve. They can examine the scene and try to figure out who actually did it. Whereas in this type of case with sexual abuse, you have, in many cases, one person going against the word of another person, And, you know, the argument is like, well, why would somebody make something like that up? And of course, that's in the very small minority, but it is a possibility, and you can't just assume that people are guilty of whatever somebody accuses them of, even if it is something this heinous. I have a friend who's a doctor of psychology and is working on her PhD in criminal law, I believe is what her title is. I'm going to have to ask her what it is officially at this point, but she's going to be on the big version of the Slackline maybe next week sometime or the week after. Asked her if she wanted to call in to talk about something like this specifically, not necessarily the case itself, but the kind of, you know, the judge's harsh words and how that looks as a prospective judge herself. That's what she wants to do. Like, what's her opinion on being forceful and emotional in sentencing hearings, and for this kind of presumption of innocence and what that means in regards to these types of sexual abuse cases, particularly with celebrities, when, you know, we're all kind of interested and invested in who these people are, and when, you know, these types of accusations come to light, there can be a disregard for whether they're true or not. Again, most cases they appear to be, but there have already been cases of you know, people that have come forward with accusations, and then it has turned out that, you know, they have been making those types of false accusations to those people, you know, for a long time, and have, you know, disturbed their family and that type of thing. So those situations do exist, as rare as they are, and so you can't discount them. And I want to speak to her about what that means as far as, you know, from a justice scale, because it's totally different now. As far as like there would always be differences in opinion of verdicts, for sure. Like the O.J. Simpson trial is a perfect example of, you know, this guy getting acquitted of murder and a lot of people thinking that he actually did it. You know, he was a celebrity though, and to this day, like, everybody kind of assumes that O.J. Simpson actually did it, and it's you know, more than anything, it's the butt of pop culture jokes, which is kind of a weird thing, but and he was acquitted of that, you know, and still, again, to this day, he was presumed guilty by a lot of people, and that's going to happen with a lot of these abuse cases as well, even if it does come out that people, you know, maybe there wasn't enough evidence or acquitted of charges for whatever reason. As soon as you get accused of something like that, there will be people that won't let it go, and it may end up ruining people's careers and that type of thing. And especially with the way that news and information and any sort of chatter can spread now, you know, a lie can spread really, really fast, and people can accept it as truth really, really fast, and then not want to change their mind, because that's just how human psychology works. And so, and yeah, so it's a pretty awful thing that this guy had done multiple times to a bunch of different people, and there's still a lot of work to do in all these communities to try to quell out all of these issues, and to expose all of these issues, and then to extinguish the people that are involved in them. So maybe we'll leave it there for today. Not necessarily a happy episode, but they can all be happy. That quote again, from Judge Rosemarie Aquilina: "I am not vulnerable to you or to criminals. I swore to hold the Constitution and law, and I am well trained. I know exactly what to do. This time I am going to cure it. It is my honor and privilege to sentence you, because, sir, you do not deserve to walk outside of prison ever again." That, again, is Judge Rosemarie Aquilina, as she sentences Larry Nassar to 175 years in prison for sexual assault of over 100 and something women. Well, it's 7 that he was actually sentenced for, but over 150 came forward, and it's been assumed that it's over 265 actual girls in total. So, yeah, bad man behind bars, so that's a good thing. That is it for the quote of the day Slackline. Thanks again to Crooked Spies for providing their music today. Please follow all the accounts: Instagram at the.slack.line, Twitter at slackline_radio, YouTube and iTunes at the Slackline Podcast. This has been The Boss.
The boss is coming.
Made up dumb fairy tale name, you.
Coming at you again for Throwback Thursday. We're going in Friday tomorrow. Hoping everybody has a fun Thursday and a fun Friday. We'll speak to you tomorrow. Have a good one. Bye for now.